Hi, and welcome. My name is Michael Lawrence. I'm the executive director of the Bridgehampton Chamber Music Festival, and I'm thrilled today to be speaking to some of the people who made United We Sing possible. First of all, I want to congratulate you all on the movie. It was fantastic, and I'll let you introduce yourselves, but we have with us Aaron Sperber, the executive producer, Ross Pedersen, a producer on the program, and Dan Petracca, the director. Hopefully that's the correct way to say your name, Dan. And I'll let you guys all introduce yourselves as well. But I also wanted to congratulate you for being selected for the T. and Charles Addams Foundation Art and Inspiration Award at the Hamptons Doc Fest. And that goes to the film that embraces the vibrancy of art in all its forms, so as to expand our spirits and lives. And I think that the award is quite fitting for this movie. I really enjoyed taking a look at it and getting to know you through watching it as well. So why don't you each introduce yourselves a little bit, and then we'll start from there.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. I'm Dan Petracca. I directed United We Sing. I have known the other two producers, Aaron and Ross, for quite some time. Aaron specifically, we've known since the kindergarten, actually. So that was my connection into this project. Aaron and Ross are part of the a cappella group featured in the documentary.
Thanks, and thanks, Dan. As Dan said, he and I have known. Oh, I should say, I'm Aaron Sperber. I co-executive produced United We Sing with Ross Pedersen. The two of us were leading the Yellow Jackets a cappella group from the University of Rochester at the time, and I was the music director. Ross was the business manager, and together well, I guess we can get into it in a bit, but we came up with the idea of going to Kenya and exploring a musical exchange with students there that we had heard about. And this whole thing really couldn't have happened without the other two guys that are here today. So Ross?
Yeah, and I'm Ross Pedersen. As Aaron said, we executive produced the film together, and not much more I can add other than we're so excited, mostly that the story is getting out there. We think it's a really important story to be told, especially now, and are really excited that other folks feel the same way.
Right. One of the things I thought was interesting in this time of COVID, became very clear that this wasn't made in the last 6 months or 8 months. And so I was curious about the time frame of when this was put together. It was almost startling to see people singing in each other's faces, and all of that happening at this particular moment, at this juncture. It's something that you wouldn't even think about in the past. But
don't do it.
Yeah, exactly. Wear the masks. But when did this come about, and in a way, how did the project come about? It mentions in the film itself that you were approached by a nonprofit, and I was curious about more about that group as well, and then how Kenya and also this little town on the western side of the country. I looked it up. It was about 230 miles away from Nairobi, and it looked like it would take about 7 hours by bus or car. And it looked like you had an interesting trip across the country as well. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about how the project sort of came to be, and then also how you ended up in this small town in Kenya.
Sure. So I could start with that, and then about the process, we can hand it to Dan. So basically, we were approached by a local Rochester-based nonprofit that works in several locations throughout Kenya. And they had they were working in this small village, essentially, of Maseno and the school, Mbaka Aromo School. And they said, singing really means a lot to these students and to their village. It seems to really be bolstering, sort of morale in the area. And it's an AIDS, stricken area and poverty stricken. And but music seems to be so crucial and essential. And it would mean so much to them if they found out that a group in America had heard about them in their little town, and if you could send a video or something saying, hey, we've heard about you, we're proud of you, keep going, keep singing. And maybe you could sing a little something for them from Rochester. And Ross and I kind of looked at each other and we were like, that sounds cool. Mm-hmm. Or maybe we could go and actually meet them in person and send that message in person, but not just send it. We could learn from them all about them and their lives. And we really didn't know what we were in for, but we just thought this will be a cool way to use music to go to another part of the world, to meet these kids, to hear about their stories, make some friends. Music will make it happen. So let's try it. Little did we know how much this experience was going to change our lives. Mm-hmm. How much it was going to, we thought maybe we'll, from what we were told, maybe we'll go and spread a little message of hope. But in fact, we might have been changed even more by the whole experience. It really had a huge impact on all of our lives and shaped us. And so that's a little bit of the story of how we ended up there and that town. But I think I can pass it off to the others to help explain the process from there to get to here and shaping the story and learning about all that goes into making a film as first-time filmmakers.
Yeah, and I think that's, to your original question, when did we go over there? It was about 9 years ago now. So it was 2011 was the first time we were over there, and that shows how little we knew about making a documentary or about anything we were doing. So as Dan alluded to earlier, he and Aaron knew each other from growing up, and he said, let's bring Dan over. Dan had made some music videos for the Yellow Jackets before, and we thought we'll just film some of the interactions. Maybe we can make a music video out of it. Maybe we didn't really know what was going to come of it, but we ended up having this very powerful experience when we were there, and were able to capture a lot of it on film, and thought, what, I think we can make a documentary about this. And then it sort of turns out we didn't know how. So it took us a few years to wade through that process, especially, every filmmaker we've talked to since said that they sort of, their first time went through the same journey of figuring out, it turns out you don't even know what you don't know. There are just so many different pieces and so many steps and so many things that need to be done that we definitely slogged our way through.
Yeah, I'm sure. And yeah, I was curious about how the idea to document this trip came about, and part of me thought, well, maybe just what you explained, you'd have somebody come over with you, and you sort of take some shots, see what happened. Then you realize, like, oh, there's a really interesting story to tell here. And at that point, then you sort of have to retrofit and sort of figure things out and make sure that you've got coverage. And then I'm sure I can't even imagine the rights clearances and things like that for songs and I'm sure there are issues all along. But I found it fascinating, to be honest. In some ways, at the core of this is, your trip. When you all leave, you all seem so fresh-faced and optimistic, and you're looking forward to this sort of, this trip, and we're going to do some music and all of this. And then as you go through, you begin to see and realize that there is a great depth of challenge that's inherent in any type of mission like this. That it's beyond just going and singing, that you encounter things that you're not prepared for, in a way, and feelings that you're not prepared for. And you can see physically the way that you all sort of change, and it manifests over time. I'm just wondering, like, what that experience was like for you, because it must have been. You talk about it a little bit in the film itself, but I'm just curious from your point of view, now looking back at it, what the biggest changes were for you, how it affected you, and that's for all three of you.
Dan, do you want to start?
Wow, so many of us, I think, had not had that experience before of either experiencing third world culture or even traveling to another country, period. And I remember a lot of talk amongst the group about what's this going to be like? And we just want to have open arms. And, I think that's really why it was important to us to have very either little or simple an agenda when we went. We didn't want to influence the experience with our own ideas. We just wanted to take it all, just soak it all in. And from an experience standpoint, it was unbelievable for all of us. I think you do get to witness the depth of how it impacted us. From a production standpoint, I think that it explains why this has been a decade in the making. Like, we really needed to discover what we were witnessing as we were witnessing it. And it was all the more powerful, I think. And the connections we made with the people there, they really are like lifelong friendships. It wasn't just an anonymous group or an anonymous culture that we were witnessing. Like, we made true, honest friendships with the people there, people that we miss today, people that we keep in touch with today. It was very powerful.
Anybody else want to comment on that, about your sort of, because it feels like it's a journey as well. It's not, there are a lot of interesting things that you've done, I think, in the film as well. There are these nice little parallels that you created. And I don't even know if you noticed them, but the idea of you're going on a journey to Kenya, but you're all going on these personal journeys as well. And it's something that at the beginning, it's very bright and optimistic. And as you go through there, that about an hour in, I think, is when you start to sense like, this isn't just a trip about going and meeting these kids and sharing some ideas. There's more to it than that. And there are the mistakes that you make along the way as well. I thought that was really interesting and telling, that sometimes good intentions aren't enough. And that it's sort of, the good intentions coupled with a little bit of ignorance sometimes causes more difficulties than you expect. And I was so glad that you included that as well, because it made it a more interesting film to me,
and
right.
I definitely agree with that. And I think it's something that we, kind of the three of us, debated a lot about how much to include and whether or not to include it. And we did sort of a couple years ago, we had like a rough cut put together, and we did a screening for some people who have actually done this before, and got a lot of really negative feedback that, hey, who are you to go and tell me more or less how to be charitable? Who are you, young kids, to say that you know anything? And I think we definitely softened the message a little bit after that, but knew we had struck something, right? There was a reaction in people that we got that said, hey, this is a new idea for a lot of people, and this is something that makes people uncomfortable the way it made us uncomfortable while we were there and while we were experiencing it and while we're going through that journey.
Mm-hmm.
I think we realized along the way that the best answer to how to deliver this message is the most honest one. How do we say that we learned that when we went there really excited and and optimistic, and then we encountered challenges along the way, we made some mistakes. How do we say that? And we kind of realized maybe we just show it exactly as it happened, and maybe along the way we have everybody who is watching this film is learning it with us. Right. So we did learn these things, and we wrestled with them in a hard way, because we thought, in a certain way, I'm all about music. I just was like, well, you know what? We're going to go there. Music's going to solve everything. It's done. Good. It's going to be awesome. And that was what I was talking about before we went, as we were raising money, singing gigs to try and fundraise to be able to go there. I was saying, music's going to bring us together. And it did in a big way, but in a very, in a deeper way than just superficially, we'll sing some songs, Kumbaya, hooray. It was, we realized we like it says in the film, we had brought a little emergency fund with us, and we thought, okay, if we put this towards helping, it's gonna, that plus the music, done, it's gonna be great. And we gained a level of, I guess you can call it maturity, but it hurt as we were going.
Well, I
to
think in some ways that is kind of what maturity is, you know, that you learn
Yeah.
through experience, that
the hard way, kind of.
the hard way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, you know, it was sobering, you know, from our sort of youthful naivete, but it was, you know, I'm proud that through this process, we found a way that, you know, honesty is the best policy, and we just showed what we went through.
Mhm.
And we didn't just ask me and Ross, who had sort of planned this thing. We watched each guy, and you ask the different guys how it was shaping them and in what different ways it was shaping them. But, you know, there were a lot of things to confront. When we got there, we had kind of seen on these commercials, like fundraising commercials for, like, you know, different charitable organizations. They show a little child who's impoverished with a cup, who's crying, you know, a lot of times.
Right.
So sad, and you're trying to evoke this, give $1 a day, and it's going. And there's nothing. Not saying that that's bad in any way. It's, as the film says, there is a place for money to be helpful.
Right.
But we had this image of, we're going to get there and everyone's going to be, like, sad because of their difficult life. And you can see for yourself, we got there and everyone was smiling and grateful and spirited and warm and loving. And these things were
that's my favorite line from the whole film, is when Dana says, you know, they're all desperate, but they're not despairing.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought that was a great line. That was a great line.
Yeah.
He actually said a couple of really interesting things, because early on in the film, when he first shows up in a little interview, and he says, you know, the first thing he thought was, wow, going to Kenya. And the second thing is, how embarrassing that I know almost nothing about Kenya. You know, and I thought that was very self-reflective, and it also sort of set the tone in a way for how the film was going to move forward. That there were things that you were excited about, and then there's so much that you don't know. And I like the fact that there's an ambiguity in the charity, you know, the charity or the charitableness of your activities and what you're trying to accomplish. Because even when you try to do things that you think are going to do well, it doesn't always work out that way. And I thought also it's a nice small way of showing a larger issue in global charities and issues that people confront all the time, when everybody wants to help, but it's how you help and where the money goes and how it gets there and who's involved and are there kickbacks and who's getting, you know, and even just the idea with the soccer ball, you know, like where you included that bit where you this was the local kids playing soccer, and you go out and you bring them a ball and they all have a great time, but at the end, you know, who gets the ball? And that's in some ways a metaphor for you know, these other organizations where they're bringing in money, you know, who gets the ball, like who gets it, who has the power. And that brings me to another point, which I thought was really interesting when you visited the Kenyan embassy, and one of the diplomats there was talking about diversity. And then you touch again upon that with the woman at the school, one of the teachers, I think, or the director, I can't remember what her role was there, but she talks about how tribalism, you know, and I thought that was a really interesting thing. I was curious a little bit more about how that affected you or didn't affect you, or and if that played a role at all in like the selections of music that people were making, or that the schools are being taught. Was there a particular tribe at the school that was most highly represented? And if that at all was worked into some of your, you know, your thinking about the project?
Yeah, I think that tribes are more or less geographically based from their history. And so you might find more of a particular tribe in a particular area, and that does pertain to the school. I think within the school, if I recall, there was a high representation from 2 tribes in particular, though I don't recall their names. And Aaron and Ross, you can jump in if you do remember how many tribes there might have been. But I don't
want to misspeak. I believe it's Luo and Luya, but forgive me.
That's right.
Yeah.
That does sound familiar. Yeah, right. So tribalism as an issue was very interesting for us to learn about, because we, as American citizens, we have such a relationship with the idea of diversity in only from a particular angle. And, as a melting pot, we're used to it being different cultures. So when you look at a country like Kenya, you assume, well, they don't deal with diversity in the same way at all, if at all, because they share a common culture and they are all Kenyans. And that's as much as we expected. And then to learn about tribalism being such a deep-rooted issue that they're dealing with, the parallels between that and what we experience in the States really took us for a trip. I think in a big way, the parallels with what they're dealing with, we thought, well, we have something to learn here as US citizens. And when we witness that they have something to learn themselves over in Kenya, I think that's where a lot of the meat of our documentary came from, that we all have something to deal with that's very deeply rooted, something to dig into.
And I think too that there's, oh, sorry, I was just gonna say, when you ask about kind of the role that tribalism played in the music and the actual kind of filming of everything, I think we try to touch on it a little bit. There's so many angles you can go down, but the fact that they learn songs in their traditional, kind of from their traditional tribal languages. They learn songs from other tribes, they learn songs from other cultures, and they go to these music festivals all over the country and get exposed to different people from different cultures and are all brought together. All these different peoples from different tribes brought together by music and all kind of share this passion. And I think that's kind of more how we were trying to think about it is, okay, yeah, you can have a song that's in a different language and it's, associated with one tribe, but there's this common thread amongst the tribes there and amongst, our Yellow Jackets tribe too, which is music.
Yeah, and I thought that was actually came across really clearly. Overall themes. There were a couple of that really stuck out to me. One, that music is a force that can bridge differences and break down boundaries, and that the music. And actually, I wrote this down, something about diversity and tribalism, and that music can be used as a force to bring those differences together. And the other interesting idea I thought that came out of this was the idea of resilience, that music can be used as a coping mechanism, as a tool to build confidence, to provide a sense of purpose and a sense of optimism. And that was clear. And this was another interesting parallel. I don't know if it was meant or not, but I think it's Falgona was the leader of the choir. I'm not sure if that's how you say her name, but she had this incredible sort of sense of self that was created through music and through her singing. And I thought it was also sort of reflected in some ways, Aaron, in the same sort of optimism that you display, with the group and as sort of the leader of the group. I thought that was an interesting kind of parallel between the two of you. And I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it was something that I picked up on.
That's the first time I've heard that, but I respect that girl a lot, so I'm honored about that. I was going to say, when you think about it, we did intend to include that, like her talking about her feeling of music, because it felt so important. She, in the same sentence, practically, she was saying that she lost both of her parents, that there's, and she said it pretty matter-of-factly that she was living with her aunt and uncle, and that a lot of things are really tough for her, but she feels good because she's the best singer.
Right.
and it was that sort of source of pride is so real. Yeah. And yeah, we realized that was, important to share.
Yeah, and not only with Falgona, but I think the entire student body there, I'm sure, has that same experience and would tell you the same thing. We just had the pleasure of getting so close with a couple of these kids because of their position, Falgona in particular as music director of the rest of the choir. Well, it was such an honor to get to know her and the rest of the students. I think it impacts them all the same way.
Yeah, and not just the choir, right? But you see how Mr. Cabas, like the first thing he does almost every time you show up to the school is pull out the stack of awards they've gotten in the National Music Festival. And it's just like, this is a great school. Here's how you know. Here's our stack of awards. He's so proud.
And that juxtaposition is the morale that keeps them going. When they have, he mentions again at this juxtaposition, he mentions that they're number one at the time for AIDS victims.
Yeah.
But they're also number one for music. And that kind of gives them a feeling of we're also on the map for something else. Mm-hmm. And we have something we're working towards and working for. And I wanted to quickly jump back for a second to the topic of tribalism, and that we've realized, it took us a while to make the film, but, it feels relevant still. And it feels relevant to things that we're facing here today in our country. Tribalism, it's different, but we all as humans have ways of kind of breaking each other up and dividing and kind of feeling a sense of identity as compared to somebody else. And it was something that we feel could be learned. There could be, without making much narrative on it and saying, exactly what we think. There's something to be learned from this. And then again, seeing the festival where it brings all of these different tribes who have prejudices against each other, brings the children of them together to sing together and learn. Suddenly they're in the same room, whereas they might never have been before. And suddenly they're learning, oh, I like that song. That song is from it's from their culture? Really? Oh, cool. Well, I learned something. Yeah.
Yeah, and while we definitely don't need to move in a political direction, but imagine if the red tribe and the blue tribe got together and just sang and danced. Like, we'd probably all be a little better off.
Yeah, for sure. No, I felt that too. This, and actually it is interesting because it has become, sadly, more tribal. There in this country, where the feeling in the past was there were differences of opinion, and there were differences of strategies, and people had different ideas of policy. And now there's a sort of demonization and this split that is so toxic to civil discourse. And that did come up as I was watching this film as well, and as people were talking about it, just how, in some ways it's sort of not reassuring, but it reminds you of just where we all come from in a way. We are all as humans, I think we have a tendency to be to care about our families, to care about our neighbors. And I think there's actually a famous Arabic saying that's something that's like, me against my brother, me and my brother against my parents, me and my brother and my parents against the neighbors, me and my brother and my neighbors against the city. And so it's sort of it's a reverse kind of tribalism in a way, that but it exists and it's part of human nature. And at the same time, it's like, what can you do to help break down those barriers, to bring people together? And music for me, and this is very close to my heart because it's something that I've dedicated my life to, is I feel that music does that. Music is a language that transcends all those boundaries. It doesn't matter what you believe in or who you believe in. Music can actually speak to a deeper truth that is not possible in the written or spoken language.
I think so. Especially at a time when things are so divisive, when things are so polarized, and frankly, like you were touching on, the demonizing. There is a sense in culture, I think, in this country and throughout the world right now, that to a degree, different is bad. Or if someone is different from you, they're against you. But something that we try to explore in this film is that different is not bad. Different is actually good. And there's a lot that we can learn from each other from those differences. But at the end of the day, there are things that bind us all together. These common threads throughout humanity. And music, we use music to explore that. Music being a universal language. Stevie Wonder says, music is a world within itself. with the language we all understand, right? I mean, really, it is universal language. So this is something that's different. We all speak different languages. That separates us, but we can use music as a common language to bring us together. I know that sounds very hippie of me, but I believe it, and we witnessed it in Kenya.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely the truth. And I only say that because it's my life, but
a little biased, but
hey, I've witnessed it. I see it all the time, And one thing I did want to ask you guys about, and I'd be remiss not to, is the role of the drivers, because I thought that they, in some ways, were at the heart of the whole thing, because they are there, they live there, they grew up there, they ferry around people all the time. And you guys came in, and they were very skeptical, I think, of you at first, in some ways. They're open, they're nice, but they're also they were somewhat reserved about how much they felt they could let you in to their real lives, And then through the movie, it becomes clear that they're like actually really pivotal, it seems to me, in your experience there, and that they made a real difference. So I would just love to know how that developed. Also from Dan as the director, it's not, maybe it wasn't something you were expecting at first, but you obviously had enough footage to create a narrative there with them. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. That relationship grew very naturally, but very slowly. I remember our first day there. I mean, maybe Aaron and Ross were aware of the entire, plan we had, our itinerary, but I didn't even know that they would necessarily continue to be our drivers the entire trip. Oh, maybe this is the guy picking us up from the airport. And I remember it was our first relationship, in a sense, with meeting any person in Kenya. And we're a group of, what were we, 12 singers and, a couple others. So we meet these drivers. I think we didn't even know if they'd speak English. So it was almost an uncomfortable car ride. We get in, no one's talking, and we're being ferried to our next place. But that's something I credit the Yellow Jackets to, is bringing people out of a shell. I've witnessed that here in the States plenty of times. So I felt for the documentary, we were in very good hands to see a relationship grow. And I'm not saying that's purely the Yellow Jackets doing, as you saw, the drivers did open up and let us in. There were some conversations between us and them that, you don't even see in the documentary, that it's like our sense of humor was completely in line with them. We didn't need to censor. We didn't need to alter who we were. We just had so much fun with them. And that relationship was so important that it's almost like, as a metaphor, they were driving us through the culture and taking us from one place to the next. That relationship was so important. I'm so glad that it comes across in the documentary, and we think so fondly of those three drivers.
By the way, we're still close in touch with them. We talk to them often. They really are friends for life, those guys.
Well, that leads me to one of my other questions is since the project, what kind of relationship have you maintained with either the school or some of the students? Obviously, you just mentioned the drivers, but have you maintained relationships with other people involved?
Yeah. So in fact, Ross and I went back last year and visited, and we got to show the film to Charles Odero, the school's music teacher. He's now also the principal, because sadly, as you'll see at the end of the film, William Cabas passed away. And that was heartbreaking for I mean, we felt like he was a family member. We were so sad when it happened, but you can imagine for that town, he was like he was like the leader of the village. Everyone looked to him as like the guy. But we stay close in touch. We've helped throughout the years also support the choir to go to the national competition more. But we've stayed in touch some with the kids. You know, it's hard. It's hard, but with technology, it's really crazy how you can stay. You know, we've been texting with some of the students who are now. In fact, I have a fun story. So Alex, one of the students who was interviewed quite a bit in the film, Alex, a young guy wearing a red shirt.
He was really interesting, by the way. I thought he was very engaging and had a good handle on sort of the world affairs, you know, as it related to Kenya.
At the time, he told us boldly, I don't know much about singing, but I want to be the president of Kenya. And he lived right across the street from the school, and well, not street, you know, right across from the school in a little, like they have a little farm plot. And his dad was always there farming just right across from the school, and you could see him out there all the time. And he was such a passionate and really thoughtful kid. And Ross and I drove up to meet with Charles Odero, and happened to look across this early in the morning, and out there was his father, like in the field farming. And I thought, well, I don't know if they'll remember us, but hopefully he would. So Ross and I walked up and said, hello, hi. Just wanted to ask, does Alex still live here? And the man looked up and smiled and said, I am Alex. And yeah, it was a crazy moment for us. Wow. So we ended up talking all about it. He was back for a while. His father passed away since the film, and he brought us to show his grave that was there in the yard. But he's tending to the farm. He's also helping to raise his sisters, and he's going to school, and he's working in an internship to be a journalist.
Wow.
All these things from this little farm. He has big dreams, and you know, we're proud and excited. But we stay in touch, texting with them. You know, they have cell phones, and they reach out. And Christine, one of the singer girls, has been in touch quite a bit. She is trying to pursue her education at the same time as being in the like army training for Kenya. Phil Gona, who you mentioned before, is married with 2 children.
Wow.
Yeah. So
the only thing I'd add to that is, you know, Aaron alluded to it a little bit, but I think it's worth expanding on that. We've also found ways to try to continue to strike that balance between, you know, helping, but helping in a way that we think is smart and based on the needs on the ground we've seen. So like Aaron said, we continue to support them going to the music festival, and we do that financially, and we think, I mean, we've seen that has a huge impact, and we think it's really important. There's a couple little businesses we've helped various, you know, students and people we've met there start, so that they can find ways to earn their own money and contribute to their own community. But so that's the only thing I wanted to add is there are some like small sustainable projects that have come out of this as well, that add a lot of meaning, I think, to all of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
It's very exciting.
I think to echo that and to round back to what something that you had asked earlier about, you know, the challenges of giving and charity as a whole. And, you know, Alex, I think, said something in the film about, you know, if you just give money and then you see some animals and then you go, we're just going to be waiting to know when you will come back. And that was a hard thing to hear, because I think a lot of people think, well, I want to do good. I want to give some money and see if it can help. And I think we realized along the way that there is a place for money and for giving to things that can really help empower. But at the end of the day, time and human connection is going to be the biggest way to help.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's not just us that can help. We have a lot to learn.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I thought, you know, it was really interesting to see how, you know, despite the conditions that people live in, you know, I think it is a human trait to be able to find optimism, you know, especially for children. Like children are just, they're happy no matter what. Like, you know, you give them a rock and they're going to be happy because they can figure out a game to play with it. And it's usually the adults that are, you know, finding everything much more difficult. Like children just seem to be able to deal with whatever situation they're thrown for the most part. And so it was, I mean, it's just beautiful. Like the people there, you really get the feeling that the people there are warm and really beautiful, also shy. You do get the sense that there's a shyness, a reticence in some ways, but not completely, you know. And it is a great, it's a great thing to see all the smiles, you know. And I think to you know, to Aaron, to your point earlier, where it's like oftentimes what you see when you hear these pleas are people who are in really destitute situations and having a difficult time. But when you travel, you do realize that people, they live their lives everywhere and there's joy everywhere, and you guys help to, you know, spread joy. And I think also, I love the fact that you included the portion where you're learning the one of their songs, and the challenges that it posed to you, you know, rhythmically. I mean, you know, historically, African music is very, very well known for rhythmic difficulties. You know, early ethnomusicologists who went to Africa said that, you know, like, oh, these people don't understand rhythm, they don't understand these things, and it's because the ethnomusicologists just didn't understand what was going on. You know, they couldn't hear all this cross rhythms, and you know, so it was really great to see that you included that as well.
Well, I mean, that experience, Jamal and I we're sitting there singing that from Charles Odero, and I remember thinking, like, okay, like, we got this. You know, we both are about to have degrees in classical music, you know, taking all my theory and everything. And as he's going through it, and he has a different form of notation too. That's brilliant. As he's going through it, I was trying to keep track, and then all the kids had it down. It was a real challenge, but it was another sense of where we were like, whoa, we think we have things figured out. Well, there's a whole lot to learn in every situation. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think those are most of my questions for all of you. I don't know if you wanted to, if there's anything else that we missed that you'd like to make sure that we cover.
Yeah, sure. I don't know if this is relevant to the Q&A or if Aaron and Ross think, you know, this is, you know, good content, but
yeah, we'll cut your mic if we have to. Don't
please
worry about
do. You all have new control over me, don't you? Well, in going and not having a total understanding of what we wanted to make a documentary about, and learning along the way, we actually got home and started putting things together and realized how much more there was. Over time, we realized that it would really benefit us to go back for a second trip. Not necessarily with the entire Yellow Jacket group, but, you know, Aaron, Ross, and myself, we went back a second time. This was about a year later, to fill in the gaps and explore further what we were learning was going to be the big issues in the documentary. And I think there's actually a pretty good mix of content, especially a lot of the interviews with Kenyan people were conducted on our second trip, where we really understood that there was a deeper layer worth digging into. And without that second visit, I don't know what we'd be watching today. from the documentary, but I'm so glad we did the two, and I think that speaks to how much there is to learn and witness when you go there, that we were not going to be prepared on the first visit, and we weren't.
Oh, that's really interesting. So some of the interviews that you had with the faculty and with some of the kids and other people, that was all conducted a year after your initial visit.
Yeah, it was. I mean, mostly when you witness, yeah, not all of it. When you witness interaction and moments, that's really the first trip and where we were just having a pure experience. But when we dive deeper into the issues, a lot of that is trip two.
Hmm. Yeah, I was going to ask, is the assistant conductor that you speak with, or the gentleman who talks a lot about sort of the philanthropy, coming in and, teaching people. He was talking about how we need to solve our problems first. Tell me more about him and like how he came into the project. Was he somebody that you met with more on the second trip? Or did you know him already from the first
Talking
trip?
about Job, is that right, guys?
Yeah, I believe.
Yeah. Anybody?
I mean, I think we knew Job from the first trip. I'm trying to.
And he works.
He's interviewed. So go ahead.
Yeah, he works at the school, so we met him right away. And I think what was interesting to us getting there is you didn't know who was going to have these really interesting viewpoints for us to talk to. It was like a blank slate with everyone. And Job did have some really interesting things to say.
Job was kind of like just to give you a little, he was like a sort of, not that there's much tech at the school, but he was sort of like an assistant, so he became sort of like a tech assistant for us. I know we didn't mention it too much during in the film itself, but one of our goals going there was to teach and learn songs and then to record them. So we did record an album that is available for people to listen to, called United We Sing. And it features on many of the songs, the students and collaborations. And as we arrived at the school, and of course we were expecting this, but there was no electricity. So we had to have our own sort of power bank that we were using to record things. And Job was there to kind of help facilitate some of that type of thing. I'm not sure of his exact role at the school. I think he was sort of an administrative assistant, to my understanding. But little did we know he would have a whole lot of, really insightful input to share.
Mm-hmm.
And it was great to meet him. And like Dan was saying, to come back the second time was a, we didn't have that plan when we went, of course. It was that we got there, we were so immersed in all of the music and in meeting people that it was only more than halfway through the experience that we were like, oh my gosh, there's so much to unpack here. And then when we got home, we were like, there is so much that we wish we had asked, but we were caught up in everything.
Sure.
So we went back, and I sure am glad that we did.
So now that you've had this, you have this film under your belts, are any of you itching to do your next project or next film? Are you planning on doing anything more in this realm?
Yeah, look out in the next decade or so. We'll figure that out.
I think Aaron can speak a lot to where he's taken the ideas that came from this project and what he's working on.
Oh, sure. So basically, I think all of us were really impacted by this. This project shaped my life hands down. So we went, and it was it didn't just sort of affirm my belief and faith in music. It just it deepened it so much, and music's power for diplomacy and everything. So I started with Jamal, actually, from the Yellow Jackets. We started a 5-guy vocal a cappella group, once we graduated, couldn't be in the Yellow Jackets anymore. They're a college group. So we started a 5-guy group. And we, with actually Dan, helped. He was on our several of our tours, and Ross was helping to manage us. We went around the world to over 50 countries, performing, doing music workshops and everything. All of that, I have to credit, was because of this trip. And that group was called The Exchange. The Exchange, when we went separate ways after 5 years of doing that, and by the way, we worked with the U.S. State Department and things as sort of what they called cultural ambassadors. Again, all because of this trip. And I've now am starting a nonprofit organization called the Harmundi Foundation, which is going to be aiming to do just this, to connect youth, particularly disadvantaged youth, from around the world, from different cultures, through music and musical interactions. Obviously, as you can imagine, COVID complicates that a little bit at this point, so we've had to delay some of our programs, but we are trying to work to find new and creative ways to make this happen and to use music to bridge gaps, particularly between young people. But again, I'll point back, this all happened. All of this, I wouldn't be doing this if it weren't for these guys right here and the trip that we took together that, that had such an impact. And really because of the friendships that we made there, the connections and bonds that we made there. And, those are friends that will be with us forever.
So I want to thank all three of you for joining us, Ross, Aaron, and Dan. It was an absolute pleasure meeting you. And I also want to thank the Hamptons Doc Festival, as well as Kevin Misaraki, the director of the T. and Charles Addams Foundation, for its ongoing support.